Hey, this is Gavin Rossdale from Bush, and you're watching Heavy Consequence.
I wanted to get right into the new album, which I had a chance to listen to a couple of times. I was lucky enough to get an advance, and it's called "The Art of Survival," and I think that's just a very appropriate title for everything that's going on in the world today. Can you talk about the inspiration behind giving the album that title?
I think it's just a shared experience that everyone's going through. I mean, the weirdest thing about the whole pandemic was, it clearly separated everyone, the whole isolation thing. But ironically, everyone was separated together in the same, under the same pressures. And, you know, whoever you come across, you just hear these consequences of these last few years and what it's done to everyone in its own way. And I don't know, I see so many people out every night, 15,000 people watching the show. And I'd realized that all these separate lives that they come back together, they reconnect, go see these shows. And I know it's a terrible cliche about the whole thing about, missing it and, you don't miss it until it's gone and that kind of stuff. But I think that it was really such a trying time. And I meet people every day with different stories of triumph and over adversity and things they went through to get to the show, things that went on in their life, And it just seemed really an apt title and share a common emotion that everyone has shared.
The first song on the album is pretty epic, "Heavy as the Ocean." It's got some really big riffs and it clocks in at over 5 minutes. I'd like to hear more, not just about the song, but about, kicking off the album with that track in particular.
I mean, I always thought that, I still think in the age of streaming and more, dominance of singles, I still think that if you take a band's work or anyone's work, um, female folk artists, whatever, and the song that opens the record is sort of, it just lays the groundwork. It tells you, I don't know, it shows you what's going on with the record. And what's weird about that song is that when I wrote that song, it really helped to find the aesthetic of the record, and it felt like a good sort of pacemaker to put there at the front of the record and just sort of set the tone really for my own writing and for everyone to kind of get a sense of what the record may hold.
Yeah. And one of the singles, "More Than Machines," I found it very interesting that there's a reference to like a woman's right to choose in there, and it came out just weeks after Roe versus Wade was overturned. Can you talk about, your decision to address that topic? And was it something that you were hesitant as, as a male singer, or was it something you just felt, so strongly about that you just really wanted to get it out there?
Well, it's a combination of things, I'm a libertarian. I grew up in London. It's sort of as long as it's it's pretty permissive, it's pretty liberal, pretty laid back, and so the draconian reversal of that law, and the kind of, I know we have this one Supreme Court judge, the woman Amy, but the thing is that it's just like these old men deciding what these young girls in these probably the most challenging times of their lives, what how to control them. It's just there's no one that I knew that held any that that resonated with. There's no one I know. Everyone I knew, male or female, was pretty horrified by that and just confused in this world, this ever advancing world where we're desperately trying to search for better ways to get along and connectivity and stuff. It seemed a very bizarre step. And what was weird is that that last More Than Machines, one of the last songs I wrote, and I'd totally been trying to think about how to incorporate that into it, because I think it's important to have things about, you write about yourself and your perspective and your complaints and stuff like that, but you're sort of part of the whole world and the fabric of what's going on. And although rock music is not really seen as a very mainstream medium, it doesn't mean rock musicians aren't aware of what's going on. You know, we play to thousands and thousands of people every day on tour. So I was just really proud to get that in there, because you also got to be really careful. You know, I don't want to come at it like telling anybody what to do. I don't want to come up with a particular political angle for people to take. I'm not standing on a soapbox. You know, I don't know more than anyone else. That's a humanist point of view, and it sort of brings up the discussion. And I think that the fact that it just says girls are in control, not the government, is enough. Is enough. I'm not steaming in there with some sort of polemic and finger pointing. I just think that it's something that needs to be said and needs to be in the air and being discussed, because obviously it's still sort of early days, and if people still have the power, to vote against that.
Yeah. And another song that struck me on the album is Creatures of Fire, and it seemed like a very personal one. And then looking at the album notes, it mentioned that it does deal with divorce. And I just wanted to know, can you talk about that one and just the decision to kind of open up about that aspect of your life?
Well, I mean, I love those mellow songs, and I found myself in a band and years of doing rock music and stuff like that. But I like those more intimate moments, and I mean, I don't, for me, it's just, love has that situation of, it has the cycles of it, and sometimes you have to address those situations where two people can't function together, even if they want to. And so it's not necessarily about divorce as much as just about any failures with great loves. Sometimes that just happens, and people have their time, and it's incredibly painful. But it's weird. Those songs for me, they sort of write themselves when you just get out of the way, and your subconscious just can just trot out the emotions. So it's quite an immediately written song, and sometimes I don't really. They're sort of more songs that I write. I think they just because I don't like the idea of ownership. I like the idea that we put songs out and they occur to everyone, because people own the songs when they come out. It doesn't. And so there's not a definitive definitive relationship. It's more the kind of the combination of all the hurt and all the sort of dis-ease inside that comes from trying to make it work with someone or not.
And I always like to ask about the last song on every album, because it's kind of the closing statement of the album. And in this case, it's 1,000 Years. And I had a little callback to the Velvet Underground,
the cliffhanger.
With the sleeping for 1,000 years, the Venus and Furs. It reminded me of that, one of my all-time favorite bands. But can you talk about not only that song, but the decision to end the album with that song as well?
Well, I think that it's again, it's the beginning and the ends of the records, and it's how you leave people, almost as if I mean, I don't expect people to play it twice, because no one wants to play a record twice. But there's something about leaving it in a sort of in a deft way, leaving it in a sort of not a bombastic way. It starts in a way as sort of a rally cry of a shared emotion of the price of life, and then the idea to finish on 1,000 years is because it has a wistful element, and it just feels like closure. Closure. When you admit stuff, it's closure. When you are open, it's closure. It's only when you hold things inside and you kind of aren't clear that there's no closure with that. And leaving on a bombastic track, it's not a rock show. It's not a show. It's like people having a private moment with this record, and in their headphones. It's the closest you can get to someone, and literally people's ear canals. And so I thought there's something. It just felt right. I had no other ideas about the beginning and end of the record. No one else cares that much. The band, they kind of leave and go off and do stuff, and so I get to sit there like the idiot, and just be like, "Oh, what about this there?" And it just felt the most natural thing to do. And I never second guessed it. It just sort of was like that made sense. I was just putting it together like a sort of a well Lego piece.
Yeah. And I found it interesting because I was looking at you're currently on tour and you're playing a number of songs from The Kingdom, which was an album from a couple of years ago, but obviously touring was put on hold during the pandemic. And but is it odd to be showcasing an album that came out a couple of years ago when you have a new album about to come out? And I know there's a number of bands that have gone through this a little bit where they've released almost two albums now in this pandemic. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, where you're kind of showcasing
Yeah,
the previous album.
it is unusual, and sometimes I trip myself up, and I'm like, but that was Blood River from The Kingdom, and now there's a new song off the new record, and I feel like an idiot myself. But it's kind of, at least it's I'd rather have an embarrassment of riches, like to be, for us, we didn't get to play The Kingdom. We have this run with Alice in Chains and with Breaking Benjamin, and it was the opportunity. It's almost like it is like the tour of the kingdom, our own private internal tour of the kingdom. Give those songs a chance to be played, and we're changing it up. We're not playing a bunch of hits. It's like shouldn't we be playing songs that people know more? And in a way, I think that I've always felt that in the past we lent too much on the catalog, and we're in danger always back in dressing room stuff or doing the sets. I was like, but we're playing into this whole thing of being a legacy. You should be pushing forward and doing that. But there is that sort of combination of how not combination, but that thing where people, that's great, play us your old stuff. So we just sort of, you just hope that isn't you. It is, but you hope it isn't, because you want to stay relevant. You want to be relevant to yourself, relevant to the people that like you, to your fans. So it's like those things. You ever seen those rooms? Whatever, all those kind of spy movies where they got to get across the room. There's a laser across the floor. They got to sneak on the museum. Writing a set list for us feels a bit like that, because it could go any number of ways. It could be completely nostalgic. It could be completely hit driven, or it could be progressive. We try to mix them up. And then it's like, well, if you're coming out on tour and opening up for Alice in Chains and Breaking Benjamin, maybe they're not your fans. So maybe you don't have to play that. Maybe you can just be like, fuck it. We're a baby band. Check it out. Check out our new kicks. I mean, what can it? There's no rules. It's not like we probably wouldn't play that set if we were headlining. But it's like, well, hang on. What's gonna get these people? You can never take people's audience away. So people that love Alice in Chains, you can love them, but you can steal them for yourself as well, because people want to. That's what everyone wants to do. That's why you do these tours, is to get new fans, and in this capacity. And so it was like, well, do they need to hear a song? Maybe they don't even know that song if it was a hit. Who cares? Does this song, give them the feeling they want? Does this song? I mean, we're pretty heavy as of now, and so it's like it just sets the show up right. And like tonight, I was like, saw Chris in the car park, and I was like, we got to play Sound of Winter tonight. That song was like a really big hit. Why don't we? Oh yeah, we got to do that. We need to check something. We got to sound check that. It's sound played a million times. So then so we do change it up, but we have been having a bit of a laugh playing songs off the Kingdom. I must admit.
And obviously, yeah, you mentioned you're on tour with Alice in Chains and Breaking Benjamin, and I feel like it's a very interesting bill in that there's a kind of a natural chronological progression between the bands, where Alice kind of preceded Bush, and then Bush preceded Breaking Benjamin. But there's a little bit of a musical commonality with that, where Alice came out with that in that the initial push of the grunge scene, and Bush kind of came on a few years in, and then Breaking Benjamin were part of that post grunge late 90s, early 2000. Is it fair to say that there's kind of this trace of influence from one band to the next on this build?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, nothing is makes it clearer than watching them and popping out and seeing various songs most nights without us, realizing how much of their set I love. When you see a band you haven't seen for a while live, you're like, damn, I love all these songs. It's so good. And Man in the Box was, for me, was such a massive song because it was at that time, obviously, I think it was, it's kind of the rock was all about Guns N' Roses. It was the Sunset sound. It was that kind of LA Sunset Strip thing. And I didn't, when GNR first came out, the Sweet Child of Mine, I was like, wow, what is this? This is incredible. But it was more. It's not really my style. It's not necessarily, although they're a brilliant band. So the other bands after that, I wasn't so enamored with. And it was when I heard Man in the Box, it was like, in London, we were growing up on 4AD, and so it was like Pixies and Throwing Muses and things like that. But this Alice in Chains, I remember that song was like, wow, here's rock music. It was such a great example of what you could do with rock music that wasn't from LA. And so that I found really inspiring, and just kind of like, filed it away. And then being out on tour with them now, I really see that. And I appreciate that. And then with Breaking Benjamin, Ben is incredibly kind every night, gives a really incredible intro talk about Bush and the relevance that Bush had for him and stuff like that. So I do see the works like that. And I suppose that's what music is. And then we're just sort of out here just trying to make friends and like take no prisoners by playing a white hot rock show.